Time now for the ArcelorMittal Power Rankings of the Big Ten teams as we stand right now. We'll go reverse order, 5 all the way down to 1. Robert, start us off. Stanley, you can just jump in when he's done.
All right, I'm gonna go with the Nebraska Cornhuskers at number 5. Now look, the competition amps up significantly this weekend against Oregon, but impressed from what I've seen so far from them. Tommy Armstrong threw the ball well this past weekend, 20 of 34 in the ball game, 3 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, only 1 interception.
Yeah, I agree with you, Robert. I think right now Nebraska is as dominant as anybody else in the country. It's not their fault that their opponents aren't as good. You just have to play the game ahead of you. And Tommy has been the factor here. He's always been the key for this Nebraska offense. When he protects the ball, they score points, and he's done a much better job this year. And I think play calling has helped him. They've taken the opportunity to allow him to use his legs more, to stretch the defense. That puts them on his heels, and they've got an outstanding receiving core that's come up big this year. So I like Nebraska at the 5 spot right now.
All right, you both agree on number 5. Let's see if you agree on number 4. Robert?
Going with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Got quite a streak, undefeated during the regular season. Really impressed, though, in the way that they performed in a rivalry game this past weekend to pull the Cy-Hawk trophy, get it from, well, actually, they didn't, Iowa State didn't have it, but an impressive performance. And to win that game 42-3, the way that Iowa had played the previous week against Miami, Ohio, I was very impressed. We talk about the offense. We know that they have the experience, but it was the defense bouncing back from a poor performance, mind you, without Josie Jewell, their best player at linebacker, to bounce back that next week and hold your opponent to 3 points. That's very impressive.
Yeah, I agree with you, Robert. The next 3 are pretty close for me, but Iowa is in the 4th position. You know, coming into the season, my concern was, would Iowa live up to the billing? Now that they had won 10 games in a row last year, were very competitive in the Big Ten championship game, could they live up to that with all these guys coming back? And I think they've sort of exceeded the hype. They weren't ranked very high, but they were great last week in that rivalry game. Robert, you played in a few of those. You know how tough it is. No matter how bad the opponent is, at times they get the best of you, and Iowa was able to handle business and finally put it on a couple teams early in the season. I like the way they look right now. Again,
Consensus at 5 and 4, but I snuck a peek ahead. It ends there. Start me off at number 3, Robert.
I'm going with the Wisconsin Badgers, an impressive victory in week 1 against LSU. But here in the second week, what impressed me is Bart Houston really started to make some plays in the passing game, starting to make some better decisions. Was he perfect? Absolutely not. But to see that improvement combined with what we've seen from this defense with Beagle at linebacker, Watt, this is a very impressive team and will battle for supremacy in the West this season.
the next team for me was Michigan. And again, I think these last 3 were very close. The reason why I'm going Michigan here is because even though their defense has been dominant and outstanding, they can throw the football. They've got great wide receivers, but they haven't figured out the run game yet. If you're going to compete at the top level against Ohio State, against Wisconsin, against Michigan State, you have to be able to run the football. They're going to have to figure that out. The offensive line has to play better, but Coach Harbaugh has done an outstanding job. Wilton Spate looks like he's been around for 3 years, let alone this being his first time starting. So I've got Michigan at the 3rd slot.
All right, which brings a question of, where's your number 2 then?
My number 2 is Michigan. I am a little bit concerned, like Stanley, about that offensive line, not just in the run game, but protecting Wilton Spate. But Wilton Spate has been tremendous at quarterback. Throws an interception in his very first throw and then recovers with a 98-yard drive in that game. And in this next game, 4 interceptions, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And on the defensive side of the ball, all of those pieces were back. Anyway, you add in the defensive coordinator, Don Brown. This is a team that is going to be a lot of trouble for a lot of folks this season. Now, their schedule is very tough. They've got some really tough road games this season in the Big Ten, but I like Michigan right now at number 2.
Well, for me, my number 2 team is here in Columbus, Ohio, and that's the Ohio State Buckeyes. Their defense has really picked it up. I think in some ways they're better this year than they were a year ago, even though these players are inexperienced. The question marks I have is they haven't played a great team yet, and the offense did struggle a little bit last week, because you go back to the losses of the last 2 years for Ohio State, it's the offense that sort of let them down when teams load the box. So a lot of talent in Columbus. J.T. Barrett's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think he's proven that week in and week out. This defense is coming along, and Ohio State is sitting right there at number 2, poised to take over the number 1 spot if they keep doing what they're doing and if they go out and have a monster game against Oklahoma.
Well, this means we definitely have disagreement at number 1. Who's your best team in the league right now?
Ohio State's poised, and now here they go into the number 1 spot, at least in my rankings. Obviously, it's going to be a huge matchup this weekend in Norman against Oklahoma, but I think this is the most talented team in the Big Ten. You talk about having a guy like J.T. Barrett on that offense, does a great job distributing to the many weapons that he has, and a defense that has looked absolutely dominant against lesser opponents, but looked dominant, adding in defensive coordinator Greg Schiano. He's done a great job of really teaching his scheme, a very aggressive scheme, to these young players. They're doing a great job playing aggressive but disciplined.
I don't disagree about the talent in Columbus. I mean, they are absolutely loaded, and they hit on most of their recruits, which is really outstanding from this coaching staff. But the team that's been able to show that they're the best team in the Big Ten right now is Wisconsin because of the schedule. Lining up in Lambeau Field week 1, going up against Leonard Fournette, a team that everybody thought would just murder Wisconsin. That defense and this quartet of linebackers led by T.J. Watt stepped up and absolutely shut down that LSU run game, shut down the passing game, and knocked off the 5th-ranked team in the country. And then they backed that up with a very, an adequate Akron team that had a dominant offensive performance, throwing for 407 yards and 6 touchdowns the week before. They absolutely dominated them. That defense is outstanding. The offense has sort of figured it out. Bart Houston is, finding out where wide receivers are, and the run game is back in line. They're the best team in the conference based on who they played so far.
Well, if you're looking at schedules, like Stanley's saying, that's clear, right? They're the only team of those 5 that's really played someone of considerable heft in LSU. Again, disagreements on the ArcelorMittal Power 5.